Ruthless Compassion is a podcast that shows you how to become fiercely kind. I'm the host, Dr. Marcia Sirota, and in each episode, I get into it with experts and regular folks about the things that get in the way of what we want. Things like addiction and mental health, isolation and loneliness, difficult family and work relationships, and the importance of self-care. I want to help you overcome the obstacles to living your best life, and I want to inspire you to become a powerful kindness warrior. Welcome, Dr. Jeremy Thompson, to the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
Thank you, Marcia. Thanks for having me on your show. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And what I always like to do at the very beginning is to get my guests to give their own little introduction about who you are and what you do, and also how you came to do it, because I always find that so interesting.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm a family medical practitioner. I'm a doctor. I'm a general kind of doctor, and I see all the different people in my community. I've been doing it for years. I've worked in cities, I've worked in country towns, all sorts of different situations. And yeah, I think when I first started working as a young doctor, I was a bit blown away by how much stress and mental health issues that there were there. So you know yourself, you have this kind of medical training and you've learned all these clear-cut diagnoses and medical conditions, but you know, when people come into particularly a normal family practice, they're often stressed and there's a whole overlay of emotions and like a big smoke screen, and your job is to look through that and find out the vital points that help you kind of diagnose what the real issue is and get the right treatment going. And so yeah, I was a bit sort of blown away by how much of that is a really important part of the job. And I realised that I actually needed to learn a lot more about sort of counselling, and then I got interested in cognitive behavioural therapy and Gestalt therapy, and I did a hypnosis training for a couple of years and met all sorts of interesting therapists and started doing training for other family medical practitioners in Australia. And so, yeah, I just was always very interested in the mental health side of things. And I think I'm not a specialist doctor. So I know like you're a specialist psychiatrist and that's your field you've gone into, but I've always kind of liked dabbling in a bit of everything. That's kind of more my personality. And so, yeah, as a family practitioner and people is what I've really been interested in. They come in with a medical problem or something, and I want to help sort that problem out, but I'm also really interested in the person, like who are they and what's life all about for them? Where do they want to go? You know, where to next? And so that's the sort of thing. I'm always sort of getting into trouble for running late because I'm chatting to people about their lives, you know.
That sounds wonderful. Well, so here you are, you're a family doctor in Australia. What city are you in now?
I'm in Sydney.
Lovely. I love that city. It's a beautiful city. I love the
Yeah,
zoo and I love the park, the big park. I
yeah.
saw the bats there. It was wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big fan of bats, but let's not digress. So you're in Sydney, you're seeing all these people and you've seen people in other places. And as a very responsible doctor, you've taken an interest in mental health, which is very important.
Yeah.
As you say, there's a lot more of it presenting to family doctors than one might imagine. What made you start getting into more of a theoretical kind of
Yeah.
conceptualization of personality? And,
Yeah.
where did you come to this from? Like, how did you get
Well,
there?
yeah, I think I was working away and I was studying hypnosis and practicing hypnosis. And I kind of noticed in all the different places where I'd worked, and it didn't matter if it's a country town or in the middle of a city somewhere, that of all the people that would come in to see you each day and each week and so forth, I'd say probably most of the people kind of seem to have their lives together and they're kind of cruising along, and yeah, they've got this medical problem, they've got a chest pain or a bad virus or something, and they come in to see you. They're quite easy to relate to, and they've got this problem and you help diagnose the problem, sort it out, and then they're gone and they're back out into the world and probably wouldn't see them for another year or two until the next thing. So a large section of the community, as it seemed to me, seem to have their lives under control and no major dramas and actually quite good relationships and so forth. Then there's another group of people that are actually coming into the doctor a lot, all the time kind of thing. Often stressed, getting a lot more bodily symptoms, various aches and pains here, there, or they've digestive systems not working out, and or having relationship problems in their family and lots of fights and conflicts. They're constantly stressed. And so I did notice that it's almost kind of like there are two groups of people. These groups of people who've got their lives under control, and then these ones who are constantly stressed. And actually, back in the old days when we had paper files, it was kind of interesting. Like, probably you'd have 6 files in my cabinet, quite thin files, and then a big thick file. And so you had all these patients with very big thick files full of all this stuff. They get a lot of referrals, see a lot more specialists, get a lot more diagnoses and so forth. So I wondered, well, what is it that really makes the difference between these two groups of people, and how is it that some people can have this natural resilience and seem to have their lives all together? And also I was doing hypnosis at the time where people were coming in and trying to get rid of deep-seated problems that their outer mind couldn't really get rid of. And I mean, putting it all together, I mean, I think for me, the fundamental thing was this sense of identity, that the people that seem to be able to manage life effectively and seem happier and easier to get on with, they've got a good sense, they know who they are, and they feel good about who they are inside. And they know they're not perfect, but the sense of their direction comes from this good feeling about their inner self. Whereas the other group of people actually seem kind of mixed up in themselves, and I call it the mixed bag concept, where they know they've got good qualities and natural talents and abilities, but it seems to be mixed up with a whole lot of self-doubt or feelings of unworthiness. And they're actually quite hard to get to know. And even though I'd see a lot of them, I still struggle to think, hang on, who's the real you in all of this? You know, sometimes you're really happy and good in your life, and other times you're really struggling, but who's the real you? And, you know, people, if I ask them that question, they wouldn't really know the answer. Whereas the other group of people, they can say, yeah, well, this is me. I like doing these things, and this is what I think about the world, and blah, blah, blah. So it's this sense of identity, this sense of self, and not only having a sense of self, but having a good feeling about who you are deep inside. And so that's where my things sort of come from. And it's been helping people to separate out the sort of negative forces in their heads which they've acquired. And my belief is that people aren't born with those. You know, they come into the world as these beautiful little babies. And as a family doctor, and I used to work in a children's hospital, so I've always had lots of mothers and their babies and little kids in my surgery sort of bumbling around the place, you know. And I love seeing them before the world has had a chance to sort of brainwash them. And you can see their natural thing. And they are all different. Some are more sensitive than others. Some are naturally tougher. Some are more exuberant. And, you know, these little babies and us young humans, when we come into the world, we don't really know what we're going to be good at or what we're going to be interested in. But you hope as they go through school that they do get to know those things, what they like, what suits them, what their natural inclinations are. And so I've been observing all this stuff for years, you know, in my practice, and watching people grow and go through all those things. And many times you might see these young kids and they're these buoyant, confident, you know, quite brash maybe sometimes, little kids there. And then later on, they're struggling. They've got these negative thoughts, oh, I'm not good enough, no one likes me, I'm a loser. All this negative stuff that gets acquired, and that can take over people. And that starts to cause problems, and then people judge them and label them for that, and so their self-esteem goes down and people can really go off the rails, as I'm sure you've seen. So that's what I mainly try to do, is give people a different perspective, which it's amazing. I don't think many people really think about this too much when they're kind of growing up. They're just trying to survive and get through life and fit in with everybody. They don't really think about, hang on, who's the real me in this? So that's what I kind of work on, to try and help people sort of get more in touch with their true self, which is a good person and certainly enough talents to get by in the world. And you cannot let those negatives get into your headspace. And some people, as you know, they actually identify with their negatives as if that is who they are, which is a terrible mistake to make. And you're really in trouble if that's where your identity sits. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, I can think of so many examples of people who are just riddled with self doubt and self criticism and all these negative beliefs and negative habits and attitudes. And also, I remember distinctly some people I worked with when I was full-time psychotherapy who would, they chose a corporate career when they were actually an artist, or they chose work with the government when they were actually an artist. And because their parents absolutely refused to acknowledge that true self that they were and encourage or support them pursuing their true goals that were congruent with their identity. And they were so unhappy their whole life because they never fit. They never fit with the work that they were doing. So I can totally relate to
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Well, that's right. And people are complex. There's many parts to you.
Mhm.
So I think everyone has these creative parts, and they might be good at music or art or writing. Or I think people have all these different elements to them. They also might be good in business, and they might be good with mathematics or something like that. And with your career, I mean, so somebody like that, I think when you're really in touch with yourself, you realize there's this creative side of me. It doesn't have to be your job, but if you've got a job as a lawyer, for example, and you've got this creative side, well, you need to get that creative side going on the side. And of course, many people do those things, and so then you have a nice balance to your life. And your life is a long journey. You're learning more about yourself as you go through it. And I think it's very important to have an awareness of how you feel inside. So this mindfulness kind of idea of just being aware of how you feel. And sometimes the mindfulness people say, "Oh, don't even think about it, but just be mindful." But I kind of think if you get a real positive energy, so it might be someone like you were just talking about, you're doing some artwork or doing something and you get this tremendous surge of inner positive energy and you think, wow, I love this, That I think is really worth taking note of because that is something that is right for you. That's something that's connecting with your inner self and your genes, your chromosomes, part of who you're born to be.
Mhm.
And there will be other things. Or some people, it might be they're doing sport and they love doing their sport. I always ask them, well, what exactly is it that you love about the sport? For some people, it's they just love the physical side of it, the movement of the body and extending themselves. And for other people, it's a social thing that they're, with their friends and the team approach. So there's all sorts of little elements that can help you get more in touch with, your inner self and all those different aspects.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because if you think about it, like you say, a baby is born and then they have their innate talents and interests and abilities. And yet there are, a couple of options. They can be supported and guided by their family, their society, their community into really pursuing the activities, the work, the relationships that are meaningful to them, or they can be guided or pushed into doing things that the other people think or the society thinks or the community thinks is appropriate for them. And so then there's a disconnect between who they are and what they're doing.
Well, that's right. And all of us as parents or even in our societies, we can be part of the problem that creates these negative thoughts in these young kids' heads where they start to think, oh, gee, what I'm doing is not right, it's not good enough, or I'm the weird one, I don't fit in. And I think you're right. It's very important to try and be gently in touch with young children as they're growing up. And if they're doing something that seems bad or wrong, rather than rousing on them and getting angry at them, just stop and listen to them a bit and say, hey, what's happening here? Why are you actually doing that? What's going on for you? And try and understand their thinking. I think what often happens with people have this mixed up way of thinking about people. So they might meet someone and they think, oh, yeah, I like this aspect of that person or that one. But then they might say something or do something and they think, ooh, gee, I don't like that. That sounds quite bad. And so if there's a few negatives in their picture of someone, then it's like they coalesce together and it all forms and they think, oh my God, what an absolute rat bag. I hate that person. Sometimes people say, oh, I hate so-and-so or whatever. I go, well, hang on, you can't hate the whole person. What is it that they're doing that you hate?
Yeah.
But people, if they have this mixed up way of thinking about themselves and thinking about others, they tend to, because it's complicated seeing people in that way, to simplify it, they put a couple of negatives together and then that forms the view of the whole person. Oh, they're a rat bag. I don't want to have anything to do with them. So my models of separating it out and trying to see the positive side and good side of a person there, even if you can't see it, but just recognizing it's got to be there somewhere, and separating out the negatives that you think are their rat bag qualities, well, then you have a way of trying to approach the person and you can say, hey, hang on a tick, just a minute ago we were actually having quite a nice conversation, but now I'm kind of feeling a bit sort of uncomfortable with some of the things that you're saying. Like, so when you said that, what did you really mean? And where does that come from? Is there a background to why you think that? So if you have this kind of, rather than judging and writing the person off, stopping to think, hang on, what's behind this? There's got to be a good person there. And why am I reacting so much? Because often now I'm not being my nice, positive, constructive self. Now I'm starting to get a bit narky and negative myself. So I have these kind of models for showing people a better way of thinking about yourself and other people, which just gives you the shape of what you're trying to do. And there are some people, and you come across them, and they're brilliant. They can get on with anyone. Even these people that some people find really difficult and can't have any relationship with them at all. There are some people that are great at getting on with everyone. And so I often think, well, what is the difference? How is it they're doing that? And the way that they do it is by what I'm saying is that they stay aligned with their positive self. They don't get judgmental and get angry and narky, but they're always looking for the good side and what's behind it. They're actually trying to help people rather than trying to punish them.
Yeah, so it's really a win-win kind of way of looking at things because not only do you get a chance to feel better about yourself and about your relationships and what you're doing, you also have a chance to be more open to other people and more willing to see them as a whole person, not just these compartmentalized bits.
Yeah, that's right. So can I just show you on there what I mean by kind of this?
Yeah.
I know partly this is sort of audio, so maybe it might not work, but this circle here, if you can see it, I've got some pluses and some happy faces and kind of love hearts on it. That's to represent that when we're born into the world and we don't know what our talents will be, but they're there and we actually haven't got any negativity in us. And then as a young child, unfortunately, you can't go on and just blissfully do whatever you want because there are rules in your family and there's rules at the school you go to and various other people have their rules, and it doesn't take long before you break someone's rule, you get into trouble. You might get roused on and even though your parents might be trying to be helpful, it doesn't always seem that way and you think, oh gosh, I'm the bad one, I'm the dumb one, and gee, they love my sister more than they love me and this kind of thing. So you start out with those positives, but then these negatives start to accumulate, and by those minus signs, I kind of their thoughts, oh, I'm not good enough, or no, they don't like me, I don't fit in, I'm a bit weird. So it's all that sort of thing. And as I say, a lot of kids, by the time they're getting through high school, they're actually forming quite a lot of very powerful negative beliefs and ideas in their head about them. And people will sometimes see those and then they start acting in an unhelpful, dysfunctional way, and so, or it might turn to drugs or delinquent behaviours, things like that. And so people pretty quickly judge you for those negatives, and then things sort of feel worse. So this is what I kind of call the mixed bag and feeling like a mixed bag. And interestingly, if you feel like a mixed bag yourself, life is difficult because occasionally you'll have a good period. You've got a nice relationship with someone, your work's going okay, or your schoolwork's going well. Then all your pluses seem to grow and, they get bigger and you actually feel quite good about yourself. You're on a bit of a high. But it only takes the the mildest thing to go wrong, one of your friends dumps you, you get excluded. And then suddenly the pluses seem to shrink away and all the minuses then start to grow. And they start to feel very big and overwhelming. And so your mood drops, you get depressed and you feel sinking and down. So if you live your life with this mixed up sense of identity, you don't really have a real sense of control over your life. You're really dependent on what's happening around you, and your life is a series of ups and downs. And people talk about resilience. What do you need to have good resilience? Well, it's hard to have resilience if you feel mixed up like that. Every time someone points out a negative in you or a fault or you've made a mistake or something, it feels like they're sticking a dagger right in your chest. You get very sensitive to these things. And some people get very prickly. There's something that they're doing wrong. Maybe they seem a bit arrogant or they're a bit pushy or something. And you try and say to them, hey, look, we all love you, but at times you get a little bit pushy or whatever. They're very prickly to it and they go, well, why are you attacking me? So this sort of mixed up way of seeing people. Now, as I said before, actually I smudged this diagram before a bit, but this is a better way to see yourself. So with this diagram, the positives that you have, you want to see that as the centre of who you are, and the negatives, you weren't born with them, you've acquired them. So it's more like you've got this heavy pack on your back. And if you can see the centre of yourself as being full of these good qualities and manage to separate out the negative forces, then you have a much better way of thinking about yourself. I know this is quite simplistic, but actually the people who are going really well in their lives and seem to be cruising through, that's the difference, that they are centred like that. And as I said before, in your communications, two mixed up people, they're always having crossed forces. At times they're getting on well and then they're fighting and it's up and down and there's no consistency there. Whereas if you have two people, I'm not sure if you can see this diagram here, can you, Marsha? But where you have two people and they've got their positives on one side and you're aligning your common areas of interest and this good sense of goodwill to each other. And you're trying to keep the negatives out to the side. And if someone here and they get angry towards you or they accuse you of something or you find there's some behaviour that they're doing that really upsets you, and there's an urge to slip over here yourself and react back negatively yourself, well, that's what you try not to do, even though you feel that. And when you talk about, what's your phrase, ruthless
compassion, yeah.
If someone's being horrible to you, really mean to you or doing nasty things to you, it's not easy to be compassionate towards them. But this is how you kind of do it. You don't allow yourself to get in there and you say, hey, come on, don't give me a hard time. I can see you're angry. What is it that's behind that? Or is there something that I've done that's annoying you or something? So just with that model, it's just easier to separate out the problems from the person themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think what you said is really important, which is that when someone does something to bother you, they are not bad. Their behavior is problematic. And I think that's such an important lesson. We need to separate the person from the behavior. Everyone is capable of good behavior and bad behavior. And if we forget that and we just see the behavior and we forget that there's a whole person, that's unfortunate.
That's right. And I think the reason why that happens, and not everyone does that, and some people are better at separating the problem from the person, but the people who feel all mixed up there, they feel like that and they see other people like that as well. So you say to them, look, it's not right what you're doing. You need to separate the bad aspects from that person. But they actually say, well, hang on, you can't do that. They are a bad person. Look, they do this, they do that. They're a bad person. And they very quickly write them off. So as I said before, like as a family doctor, I have these discussions all the time with people. Every time a new patient comes in, I want to get a bit of medical background. I say, hey, are there any medical illnesses running in your family? What about your mum and your dad? It's unbelievable the number of people that say, oh, my dad, we never see him, he's an absolute ratbag. And I go, oh, okay, what happened? Oh, he left her, he's an arsehole. And so they have this label for them, they write him off, he's gone, Oh, what about mum? Oh no, she's crazy, she's an absolute witch. And they have these labels for them. Or my sister, no, we have nothing to do with her, she's a complete lunatic. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure you've heard that yourself. It's a very unhelpful way of thinking about people. And if I try and raise these concepts with them and say, hang on a tick, no one's a witch, and it's not right to call people those names. Everyone does have a good side in them, and the way forward is to connect with that good side and separate out those things. But a lot of people, they don't really get that because their whole way of thinking about themselves and other people is just different to probably how you think about them.
Yeah.
And so I think this explaining these concepts, the reason why I've written this book, Understand Your True Identity, is because I just see so many people going through these unnecessarily difficult lives just because of these very basic perspectives that they've kind of grown up with without really thinking about it. And it makes such a big difference.
And now, let's pause for a quick word about my other podcast. Since I was a kid, I've loved watching movies. As a psychiatrist, I'm blown away by how film touches us at our core, deepens our self-knowledge, and can improve the human condition. I wanted to let listeners know that I've started a new podcast called Real Mental with Dr. Marcia Sirota. I'm going to be talking with directors, writers, actors, and critics to help people figure out their lives by getting to the truth about mental health on the big and small screen. Some recent films covered are Anora, Amelia Perez, Will and Harper, and The Last Showgirl. Please subscribe to Real Mental on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, yeah. It's interesting because you have a concept that is very similar to the kind of work I've been doing when I was a psychotherapist, which is to look at all these negative beliefs and attitudes and expectations and habits that become internalized during childhood because of abuse or neglect or coercion or just negative messages. And then the person grows up and they're carrying this big emotional baggage, right? These wounds. And then, the true self gets kind of lost under the weight of all these wounds, all this negativity. And so really, my job has been to try to get the person to release the wound, grieve their loss, face their pain, let it go, and then find, the things that they love, the relationships that they find meaningful, the pastimes and work that's fulfilling and important to them, and to be their best version of themselves. And so really what you're talking about is exactly the same thing from an approach that came as a family doctor. And so I always say that when you're on the path to the truth, you can have many different beginnings and it all kind of leads to the same place.
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting. I mean, there's many people saying the same thing as what you're saying and as what I'm saying, and everyone has their own kind of different angle on it. I'm kind of one of those people, I like sport and things, and so, well, for instance, these models, if you extend it, so it's a good way of thinking about yourself, it's a good way of thinking about another person in your one-on-one relationship, but then you spread it into your family, in fact, everyone in your community, and I think the world really needs to, it actually bothers me a lot now. I think everyone's, rather than talking and communicating openly, people all got little headphones on, like you and I have. I don't know with the communication where it's going, but I think there's not often this helpful, compassionate way of working with people. So in a sporting team, you can have a really good team where everyone helps each other and it brings out the strengths and natural abilities that individuals have, which otherwise get suppressed. And sometimes if a good coach comes in, and normally they're just a really nice person that can relate to people as individuals and gets everyone working together. And essentially that's what they're doing. The negative bits they're keeping them out the side and keeping all the connections positive. So the positive bit grows. We were just having a little chat before about mental health diagnoses. The problem that I have with too many mental health diagnoses is that people can tend to identify with those diagnoses. So they're kind of identifying with the problem areas. And while as I think it's important that people deal with their problem areas, a far more important thing is, hang on a tick, what about the real me? Even if I didn't have these problems, what would the real me be doing? And you need to get that side of your life going. And it's kind of funny, even in sporting teams, if you're coaching, you can spend a lot of time focusing on all the things that are going wrong. But often, if you focus on the things that you're doing right and making them better and better, then the problem areas seem to fall away without you even having to address them. And I think with a lot of mental health stuff, it's a bit like that, that once people get more in touch with who they really are and get that side of their life moving forward, a lot of these dysfunctional things kind of fall by the wayside without you having to deal with it. Otherwise, you're spending your whole life trying to rub out that little problem. Yeah, okay, now I feel a bit better, but I've still got these other three problems. And all the cognitive behavioural therapy techniques and all these things that we do, yeah, they're really important and valuable. But by far the most important thing is this thing of separating them out to the side. You can have these problems as if you're carrying them around on a backpack. You can still get on with life quite well. And none of us are perfect, so we're all carrying around a bit of baggage.
Well, it's interesting because, that's really the paradox of mental health, like we need to know what we're dealing with because as we mentioned before, some conditions really need treatment and you need to know if you need to give somebody treatment, what kind of treatment is appropriate, what's going to help, not hurt. So that's important. On the other hand, you don't want to pathologize everybody and have everybody walking around with a label on their forehead, I am this diagnosis, because
Yeah.
yes, it's not helpful. And I'm unhappy with the way social media has got everybody saying, okay, I have these 3 diagnoses, and here's my neurodivergence, and here's my mental health, and here's my eating disorder, and here's my addiction. And I know people are trying to understand why they're suffering, but you're right. If the focus is too much on what's wrong as opposed to, what are my passions? What are my abilities? What are my skills? What are my interests? What kind of people do I like spending time with? Where do I like to go? What are my goals? What are the things that are important to me? Then we're just a bunch of people with a bunch of labels, pathology on feet. And that's
Yeah.
very unfortunate.
No, that's right. And I sometimes say to people, hey, look, you can't hide behind that label. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's anxiety that sort of stops people. Once you have a sense of the real you and what you might want to do, I think you mentioned that lady that was, or it might have been a man, was working in, was it a lawyer
In
who really had this
corporate.
corporate, who really had this creative side. So for her to break free and do the creative thing, that takes a bit of guts, and there'll be a bit of fear, there'll be anxiety. And if you really want to do something, you need to step out there and do it. Face your fears and your anxiety. That means learning to deal with anxiety. And I think that's a fundamental thing that everybody needs to learn all about, is anxiety, how it affects you and how you can't give into it, that you need to sort of push through it and keep yourself steady and get these things going. But I think a lot of people, they do hide behind their labels and they say, well, I can't do these things because I've got these 3 diagnoses. And how can anyone do anything while they've got those 3 diagnoses? And I go, oh, come on. Yeah, you got those diagnoses. They're only minor things. Well, you've got plenty of strengths. We've evolved over millions of years, survival of the fittest. All of us who are here on the planet now, we're the best of the best. We're strong. You've got what it takes to move ahead. Come on, what do you want to do? So I try and take that positive approach. I think you need to put these things in their place where they belong. They should not be dominating you. It's just doesn't make logical sense. Do you know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
everyone's got what it takes. It's just a matter of putting those negative forces out to the side so that they can't paralyze you, because that's what they do. They get in there and they tie you all in knots, and they stop your true self from getting out there. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, one of the things you were mentioning is about, people having to take a chance and do something. But, if you have a lot of negativity in your head telling you bad stuff, then it's even more daunting to imagine somebody out there criticizing you or judging you. So, that can really stymie a person. Like if somebody wants to do art and have an art show or write a book and put their book out there, it can be very scary to have other people reading their book or looking at their art or watching their performance, because if they're judging themselves inside their head, how scary will it be to be judged by others? So we have to find a way to not be so frightened of people's opinions. And, we can say, look, you're entitled to your opinion. You like my art, you don't like my art, whatever. I can still feel good about doing what I'm doing. And so I also think it's so important, even though in this day of, likes and clicks, everyone's so focused on everybody liking and approving of them. But I think it's so important that we kind of take a step back and not be so overly invested in everyone's opinion about us, because it can really paralyze us. So much of writer's block is just anticipating what the reader might say, how they might judge you. So if we can let go of the fear of judgment, I think we can do so much more. And that starts with kind of silencing that critic in your head, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'm sure you've noticed, that I think a lot of the school kids going through, they are so aware of how they look, how they come across. So there's all this feedback, all this online social media feedback, and they get paralyzed by sort of thinking about their image. There's all this body dysmorphia thing going on. And I think, yeah, if we didn't have mirrors and we didn't have all these things, it'd be a lot better, because people need to be who they are and just do things because it feels right for you. It's like if you might want to do some artwork, you do it because it feels right and you get that enjoyment. If you get a positive inner energy while you're doing it, it doesn't really matter what other people think if you're doing it. Yes, it's nice if other people appreciate your work and agree with what you're doing or saying, but it's more important that things feel right for you inside, I think. And it's like beauty. You can see a person who maybe they're at first look they're not that beautiful, but then you feel this warmth and beauty from within in them, and that's the important thing, to have a beauty within, I think.
Yeah.
And be yourself and not worry too much about what people say. And as I say, if you have this positive centered way of thinking about yourself and other people, even though people might criticize you in what you do, it doesn't feel like a dagger in your chest. It feels like, yeah, you got a pack of negative things on your back there, and they're pointing one of them out and saying, hey, that's no good what you're doing there. If you see yourself separate from your negative issues and whatever, or bad habits, you don't mind people, pointing it out, because it doesn't feel like it's part of your heart and soul. So then you can take it as constructive criticism and you go, oh, wow, thanks for telling me that. I didn't realize I'm so annoying that I do that annoying thing that's upsetting everybody, and you feel quite good that they've pointed it out. So, yeah, again, it all comes down to this sort of sense of self and separating it from your sensitivities and areas in your perspective of yourself.
Yeah. I want to circle around because you were saying how it's so important that it feels good for you to be doing these things that makes you feel alive and
Mm.
wonderful. And I was thinking how, like with creativity or with sports or many things, practice makes perfect. And if you keep doing it because it makes you happy, you can't help but get better at it. You're going to, like you're going to want to learn more about it. So you inform yourself, you educate yourself, you're going to practice it because you like doing it, because it feels good, and you want to get mastery at it because that makes you feel even better. So if you keep doing this thing and learning about it, you can't help but get better at it. So maybe people might want to criticize you at some point, but eventually they're going to be enjoying what you're doing because you can't help but improve over time. So it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? I mean, there's kind of two things. I mean, we all feel good when we've done well in something and everyone gives us a pat on the back and go, oh, look how well Jeremy's done. Isn't that fantastic? So those sort of things do make you feel good. But that's a little bit different to just doing something for the actual substance of what you're doing. And you don't really care if you do a good job or a bad job as far as how you're rated by society. So, yeah, there's those two things there. I mean, I think we have evolved as a communal species. We do need to feel appreciated within our tribe, and
Mhm.
everyone needs to be good at something. You need to be able to do something out there that people in your community will appreciate. And in fact, they'll be willing to even pay you some money for it so that you
Yeah.
can get by, because that's how our world kind of works. So there are kind of those two sides to it. Yes, there's the having an awareness of what your local community wants, and and will pay you for or give you a pat on the back for. But there's also this inner thing of what feels right for you. And sometimes the things that feel right for you, no one's going to pay you for it. I mean, you might love knitting jumpers. You're never going to make $1 million knitting single jumpers, I don't think. Maybe. But if you just love it or something, well, you do it. And you do many other things as well. But yeah.
So I have to say, when you said about knitting, there's a man called Kafi Fawcett who loved to knit, and he started knitting these incredibly gorgeous
Right.
geometric pattern sweaters, and he became a superstar knitter, and he's written
Wow.
all these books, and he has all these knitting patterns, and yeah, he's become extremely well-to-do and successful and
Wow.
famous as a knitter. There's also a guy named Dale Chihuly who was a glass blower, and he blows the most incredible glass sculptures. So if you have a passion, and there was Mrs. Fields who liked baking, and she became a very famous cookie baker. So sometimes if you really have a passion and you really pursue it, you actually can
Yeah.
become very rich and famous and
Well, there you
renowned
go.
for your passion if you really follow it. Not everybody, of course, but I think that the most important thing is to do it, to really go for it, and it can be your job or it can be your pastime that's really fulfilling, but,
Yeah.
go for it and see where it takes you. Who knows, right?
And probably all those people, they had some other job that they were doing, working the service station or something while they had their little hobby on the side. And fortunately for them, it turned into something. So, yeah, as you say, do those things that you feel a pleasure in, and just if you're noticing something that gives you that inner energy. Like I sometimes think you might meet a group of people and they're all chatting about what they're doing or where they've been on holidays. And it's kind of funny, like sometimes one person will be talking about what they're doing and you think, oh, what a strange thing to do. I can't imagine ever wanting to do that. And then someone else will be saying, oh, I'm doing this. And you think, wow, what a great idea. So there's little things like that I think help people to just to get to know yourself. So I always take note of those things. When I get a little surge of positive energy with something someone else is doing, doesn't mean I run out and go and do what they've been doing, but I just kind of keep it in the back of my mind. So I think with people, part of how you separate out the negative forces from your true self is by just having a daily awareness as you go through your life. And every time you get those little surges of positive energy, you were 5 out of 10, now you're suddenly feeling 8 out of 10. Okay, what is it that's exciting me? What is it here? And I reckon take note of those things.
Yeah, what makes you feel alive?
Yeah, and kind of write those things down on a kind of a list there. And then if you actually then get a bad feeling, suddenly you're down at 4 out of 10, there's usually a little negative voice in your head telling you, oh God, you're no good. There you go, you're a loser again, or something negative and unhelpful. But yeah, you can write down those little sentences that happen. And I reckon with most people, they've got 5 or 6 negative little lines that they say over and over to themselves. If you go back into their lives and their childhood, you can usually find out where they came from. And
Mhm.
and also I find, I don't know if you do this as a psychiatrist, but often people come in with a problem behaviour or difficult emotion or something. And I'll say, well, how long have you been feeling like this? Or what were you like as a little kid, when you grew up, say in kindergarten or year 1 or 2, And most of the time people say, oh, actually I was a pretty happy little kid then. And I'll say, oh yeah, did you have friends over? And yeah, I had friends over and, I was quite good then. And go, well, when did you first start to have these symptoms? And it might have been when they were 8 or 9 when something happened, for example. So just having this sense of actually, yeah, I did start off my life as this happy little person. It just helps people to kind of understand and reset the perspective a bit that, yeah, there is a good core in there. My natural self is a positive, happy, friendly person. And all this bad feelings and, doubts and anxieties, there's something that's got into my system and I need to get it out again. I've got to reconnect with who I truly am. So, yeah.
Sounds wonderful. Well, it's been really fun talking with you today, Jeremy.
Mm.
And I want to ask you my 3 final questions. So the first question is, where can people find you if they're interested in learning about what you do and getting your book?
Yeah, there's an understandyourtrueidentity.com website, and there's just drjeremythompson.com as well. So they should be able to find me. So I've got this book, it's out in America, and people should be able to find that at Amazon or in hopefully in bookstores. Yeah, I mean, they can contact me or send me messages if they want. And
Wonderful.
yeah, I still work here in Sydney. I work full time, so this afternoon I'll be back in my practice chatting away to different people. But yeah,
Terrific. And are you working on any new books these days?
oh no, one book is going to be enough, I think, for me. Yeah, I reckon there's a number of things that I think are really important. And in the book there's these ideas of a better way of sort of thinking about yourself and other people, and it flows on through there into communication things, assertive communication and how to deal with aggressive people and or passive people and so the models kind of work with the whole thing and flows through, and there's some stuff about how your mind and your body works, and there's kind of all the things that I think are important for a happy, healthy life in the book. So it's kind of got everything that I feel I'll ever kind of know in my life. I don't think I'll be writing another book.
It encapsulates everything you want to share.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, speaking of that, what would be your call to action for the listener today? Something they could consider or even put into the real world?
Well, I think it's this thing of in your day-to-day life, well, look, it is good to revisit your past and have a look at it and try and find what your true self was good at and enjoying and trying to do when you were young and growing up, and separate that out from all the traumas and the problems and realize that they're separate kind of things. But probably the main thing is just in people's day-to-day lives, like don't worry too much about things, but try and have an awareness of how you're feeling. And I think it's important. If you feel uncomfortable about something, it's really important to say something about it. It might be, hey, I'm not sure what it is, but there's something we're talking about that's giving me an uncomfortable feeling, and just express that. But have an awareness of how you feel from 0 to 10. 10 out of 10 is as happy as you could be. 0, life's not worth living. And have an awareness of that. And when you get those little surges of positive energy, they're really important. And because then you're on the right track. You're actually doing something that's kind of right for you. And I think if you take note of all those things, don't focus on the bad things, but when you do get a bad feeling, just be aware of what you're saying in your head and write that down. Because I think that's, if you kind of start logging things like that, but keep it separate. So a lot of people keep a bit of a diary or something, but it's all mixed up and it kind of gets confusing after a few days. But if you keep 2 separate columns there, then after a while you gradually get more of a sense of, yeah, this is the real me. And like I sometimes think I might be with someone and they're doing something, it makes me get all angry and I feel like judging them and cursing them. But then I stop and think, hang on a tick, what would the real me want to do? And the real me is a kind of caring person. I like to solve problems. I like to help people. So what would it want to do? So it doesn't want to punch that person or abuse them. It wants to kind of help them a bit. So that just gives me a moment for my emotions to calm a little. So then I can take a constructive role. So I don't know. I guess if people can try and do that, we need to make the world a better place. I think that's the thing. And you're quite right that the way forward is through kindness. And I hope my ideas give people a bit of a perspective where they can see that, yeah, now I can see how I can do this. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, it's really been a pleasure talking with you, Dr. Jeremy Thompson, today. Thank you so much for coming on the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
Thank you so much, Marcia. I've really enjoyed talking to you. You're very easy to talk to. Yeah.
This is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasirotamd.com, where you'll learn about upcoming online events as well. Also, we love getting referrals from our listeners about future podcast guests, so please email us at info@marciasirotamd.com.